Data show. We are live. This is the first time we're doing a live podcast episode, so I'm really excited. We'll see if folks can join us. And at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat box. We'll get started in a couple minutes. I will go ahead and start pulling up our questions. And because this was super last minute, I'll be really impressed if anyone's able to join us. Um, but that's totally fine. If people don't catch us from the beginning, we can just start. And as folks come in, we can answer questions. So feel free to put that in the chat box. And then for those who are not able to stay for the entire show, we'll have this recorded and posted on the podcast. All right. So just going to wait a few seconds. Make sure everything's set up. All right, so today we have a special guest, Nisar Ahmed. He is the lead decision scientist at CVS Health and is the mind behind the popular YouTube channel Business Intelligence and the host of the Data Nerd podcast. He has a passion for data analytics and for teaching. So he is a well-known Tableau instructor and coach, and we'll talk more about that on the show in a bit. I was actually on his podcast, the Data Nerd podcast, a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm thrilled to have him on here. Welcome, Nisar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Hannah. And I know you said that the well-known podcast. I'm just trying. I took a lot of inspiration from your podcast. So, I'm just trying to follow in your footsteps as well.
That's great to hear. Don't make my mistakes, though.
Well, we learn. We all have mistakes. That's how we learn, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm also interested in hearing about your journey into data analytics and how you discovered a passion for data viz, specifically Tableau, because I know you do a lot of Tableau. We can see that the logo in the background. So if you can tell us
Yeah.
a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. So, I've been in the analytics space, data analytics for some time, but I would say, 8 years ago, around 8 years ago, I started a job at a company where they had a Tableau license. Okay, and I didn't really know what Tableau was at that time, and but nobody was using it, and so I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Tableau. You want to learn it? Do you want to use it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Let me give it a shot." And so I started exploring. I started talking to other people who were using it, researching it online. There's a lot of online resources. Even Tableau has, training that you can go through, some introductory level. And I was like, this is great. Um, Growing up, I was always into art. Like I loved sketching, right? I kind of had that artistic mind. It was a hobby of mine. I always enjoyed doing that. As I got into college, I went into data. I didn't really pursue art any further. That's not really where my career was taking me. It was a hobby. So I got into data, studied information systems. I love it. That's something I loved. And I started my way into analytics. What's what I liked once I started using Tableau was that I found that I got my art passion back, because Tableau is a combination of data and art. And the use of those two skills, both your left and right brain together, really allows you to create something that is impactful in Tableau. And that's what I loved about it. And it kind of reignited my passion, and kind of my career took a different trajectory from that point, a different direction. And ever since then, from 8 years ago and now, that's my focus is Tableau.
That's awesome. And I also felt the same way with Tableau, that with data visualization in general, like I kind of dabbled in art too before, and I enjoyed it, the creativity that comes with it.
Mm.
And you're right, like with data, at least my early experience with data analysis, it wasn't as it wasn't as engaging for me creatively until I started to visualize things on maps and create data visualizations, and I got to see that there's this opportunity to use that talent there. So I love that. And now you're also doing Tableau trainings. Can you tell us what inspired
Mm.
you to start doing that?
Yeah, so when I started working in Tableau, at the company, um, they were in a place where they had reports, more like, Excel reports here, other systems that had to go in to manually pull reports, right? Um, I created a Tableau dashboard that kind of put everything together in a visual form that they really loved. And they're like, this is great. Um, can you teach me how to do it? And like other departments would reach out to me, and other people, they're like, how did you do this? And so I was like, oh, you know what? Um, that's fun. I can teach you, even though I was actually really new at it. But I felt like whatever knew, I can teach, and I can tell them, things that I've learned and learn along the way as I'm teaching. I feel like teaching, as you're teaching, you're also learning. And so that's kind of where I started teaching, was internally within my company. And I was like, this is not bad. I actually enjoy it. I like the training aspect. Um, so fast forward a little bit, maybe I started training for, maybe a few months, up to 6 months. Um, an opportunity presented itself where a school, I don't know if you've heard of General Assembly, but
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
campuses across the country in major cities. And so they were interested in finding somebody who had the Tableau experience, but also Excel, SQL, and analytics.
Mhm.
And so I applied, and reached out to me. I went in, did a sample teach, and they liked me, and they said, do you want to teach? I was like, wait, I can. I've only been using Tableau for like a year, and now I have to teach.
That's amazing.
I'm like, I don't know. At the back of my mind, I had doubts, to
Mhm,
be
yeah,
honest, right?
understandable, yeah.
I never did this before. But that I think getting out of your comfort zone allows you to kind of do things that you may not have done, or may not be comfortable with. And that's something I always talk to, my students about, is like, don't say no to opportunities. You never know op- what my what opportunities may present themselves from that. And so then I started teaching their General Assembly, um, and that's where it started, and I really liked it. And now, I'm starting my own. I started my own YouTube channel, and I'm teaching remotely now at Ziplines, where I teach certification classes across colleges across the country. It's all remote. And then I also do data coaching for PH data, where I do one-on-one coaching sessions on Tableau.
Amazing, and, like, that one opportunity kinda cascaded into all of these other opportunities, giving you the confidence to even take on those opportunities because you saw that it's actually, there's there's a benefit to getting outside of our comfort zone and to
Mm.
not listen to that self-doubt, that imposter syndrome that sneaks in. I can imagine, like, for folks who there are people I know that have been using a tool for many years, and they'll still feel like they're not proficient enough to do something like that. And I've also found, just, as someone who's done teaching, is that when you teach something, you actually learn that thing a lot better, and you can learn from your students as well. It's a two-way thing.
I couldn't agree more. I think the point you made about learning, I have to, before I teach, I have to learn it myself before teaching. And to be honest, not everything that I taught, at least the first time around, I knew. I had to learn it and then teach it.
Right.
And then that gives me confidence. I'm like, if I can do this, if I'm able to teach other students something that I'm learning and then teaching to them, and hopefully I'm doing it effectively, what does that say about my ability, or anyone's ability, to take on any new task or learn something new? Right?
Mhm.
It, that syndrome is very natural for people to feel, and I think that sometimes is a blocker for people to grow.
Right. It's also when you're giving these trainings, you're doing this in front of other people. Did you find that you were a good or natural public speaker, and so doing
Mm.
these trainings was easy, or was that something you also had to overcome?
No, I'm an introvert. I've always been an introvert. Growing up in my childhood or through high school, I hated public speaking. I didn't like it. It was not something that I enjoyed because I had a lot of fear.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I had to overcome a lot of that. And it's something that I had to learn how to do. But what happens is, and what I've learned is that I think we are a harder critic of ourselves than other people are of us.
Right.
And so when you think about it that way, and then you think about what's the worst case scenario here, like what's the worst that could happen, then you're like, okay, maybe I can give it a shot. And once you do it, and then there's a positive outcome where it ends up turning out well, like it's not that bad. And so then I had to kind of learn some of that. I didn't really learn how to public speak from any formal training per se, but I would watch others. I would learn from others. Um, I would record myself. When I first started teaching at General Assembly, all my sessions I would record like on my phone, just the audio, and then I would listen to it back over and over
Wow.
again. I would before each class, I would say for each 1 hour of teaching, I would have 3 hours of preparation time. I was obsessed with making sure that I did it 100% correctly. And so those were some of the things that I tried to do to kind of get more comfortable with public speaking. And now I'd say I am more comfortable, but you still get nerves. Like, I mean, I think it's normal. I don't think anyone can be 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as a fellow introvert, I feel I have similar feelings and experiences like you, and I'm sure other people who are listening who can relate to that as well. But I like this the point that you make is that getting out of your comfort zone, it's going to be uncomfortable the first few times. Maybe it'll continue to be uncomfortable, but it'll get a little less uncomfortable. I would
Mm.
say. There's still some times where I still feel nervous and before I present, and I get that anxiety, and that's for me. I've just accepted that that's normal, and I'm just going to learn ways and tools to help me manage that, so that I'm able to present my message effectively. I also like how you started to practice public speaking by giving trainings on topics that you are comfortable with, that you're passionate
Mm.
about. And that's a tip that I actually give to other folks who are interested in practicing their public speaking is to not go ahead and sign up for a keynote speech, but to start signing up for or volunteering to present at a meeting amongst your team members or your manager, low stakes environments where you don't feel like if you mess up, it'll be an embarrassment to you, or like, it's just there's not a lot at stake in that way. There's a little bit less pressure on you, but then you also are talking about something you're passionate about. And if you want a further challenge, then you could move on to doing trainings and or talking about topics that are relatively new to you. But I recommend starting with something you're passionate about, like Nisar did with Tableau.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Talk about something that you love. And when you do that, then the passion for that will kind of come through. People know
Yeah.
when you're talking, people know whether you like it
Mhm.
or not, right? Like they
Definitely.
can tell your enthusiasm level.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's very clear. I'm curious if you have because when you're giving these trainings on technical skills, I notice sometimes because I've given these trainings as well. Sometimes you can tell for some people it's going over their heads, or you're losing their attention or engagement. So, do you have any tips on how you can keep your audience engaged during your Tableau trainings? And this could apply to other types of trainings as well.
Yeah. I think the engagement level is key whenever you're doing any type of training, whether it's Tableau or not. But I think in the data space, or data analytics or Tableau, it's not about lecturing. It's not a traditional lecture, how you have in colleges where you have the professor standing in front and lecturing students and then they're taking notes. The way that, or I think the effective way of teaching is introducing the material, showing examples, but then having some sort of hands-on exercises or having them do it with you, right? So the way that I would do it is, okay, here's a material, here's your introduction, here's some examples. Let's walk through it together. And I like to keep it an open discussion, right? It's not just a one-way conversation. I ask them questions and I get their input, and then I see like, how would you do it? And then we do it together. Then they feel like they're involved and they're part of that learning. and then you give them exercises after that to do themselves, and you walk around or you see what they're doing, and you provide feedback. And the best way to learn is not by listening, but by actually doing it hands on. And that's when you retain that knowledge. And so those are some of the practices that I try to do when I'm teaching Tableau. And and also, whether it's in person or remote, they're all different things that you can do as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love the hands-on exercises, even if you're not training on a technical topic where there is necessarily um, activities that you have to do, but if you incorporate workshops or discussions into smaller groups, I found that it's actually helpful in getting the engagement because as an introvert, I can definitely relate to that, that I'll feel more comfortable speaking in front of a smaller group versus a larger group. So sometimes I break up people into smaller groups so that if there are people like me who feel more
Mm.
comfortable speaking up and talking like that, they can have that opportunity to do that. So these are great techniques. I was just looking at the comment section and I see that Sarah is saying that um, love the connection to art and data. This is so cool. I'm sure there's other data professionals who also like art and like that connection, especially where data visualization can help with that.
Mm.
Mujahid also agrees about teaching that you're also learning. And then Dustin was also here, and he's so glad, Nisar, that you are doing public speaking, and are helping people while you're doing that. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
no, Dustin's been one of those people who really helped me out. Actually, Hannah, you've attended my usually in my classes, I have guest speakers in to get for question and answers at the
Yeah.
end of the classes, like the end of the cohorts. Dustin was one of the initial ones who used to really come in initially, and he's always a great help, even in setting up my podcast. So a lot
Oh,
of
that's awesome.
credit goes to Dustin for that.
That's great. Dustin, if you're listening, we're fans. Actually met Dustin last year at the Inspire conference. We were
Oh, nice. Yeah.
influencers there. So yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting him and hope to meet him and Brandy in the future. They do Data Career Summit and they have a podcast as well. So they're a very helpful resource as well to the data community. It's great that he helped you as well. That's amazing to see that. And here you are with your podcast and doing more Tableau training. So that's amazing. This actually brings me to the next question. Specifically, when it comes to your data career, in what ways do you think your presentation skills, your Tableau trainings have helped you in your career?
So we talked about, or I mentioned how it gave me confidence when I was teaching. And I think when I start presenting, it does a couple of things. Gives me confidence not just with public speaking or presenting, but also gives me confidence on the topic that I'm talking about. Okay. So the combination of those things allows you to then take that what and apply it to your job, right? And so like when I'm at work now, if there are meetings, I don't shy away from presenting. If people ask me if you want to present, I say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. That's not a problem. Um, I'll also not shy away from answering or asking questions if there's a need for that, right? Um, as I'm teaching or as I'm presenting, I not everybody knows everything, and that's something that I learn is that you don't have to know everything to talk or present. And I think that same parallel can be drawn at work, even if I'm not doing presentations or talking. It's okay to talk and give your input or take questions, even if you don't know everything, because at the end of the day, you can find the answer, and it's okay to do that. And I think the combination of that has allowed me to, the more I speak out at work, the more I'm heard, the more I'm seen, the more I'm known, and the more people reach out to me. And then that helps me with my career, right? And that helps me with my progression. And then slowly but surely, you opportunities present themselves.
I'm so glad that you're seeing the benefits in your career already, with being able to public speak, because we tend to think public speaking is a very formal event where you are up there standing in front of people talking about a particular topic. It's pre-scheduled, but then there's also these opportunities, like you mentioned, in meetings or in other discussions where you can speak up, and that also people have that fear and hesitation sometimes of speaking up, but you've demonstrated how that can actually help you with visibility, help you, also help your team members and other people who are there in the room hear your perspective and learn from you, while you're also learning from others. So it's very true, and I think that if even if you don't feel like you know something 100%, um, I encourage everyone to participate in discussions, and be okay with not knowing everything, and learn from others. So that's great that you've seen that. I've also had the same experience with presentations have helped me with my career. One presentation actually helped me get a promotion, and I had no idea about it until much later,
Mm.
which is great because I would have been a lot more nervous presenting if I had known a promotion was at stake. But yeah, it's helped me with visibility as well, and I know there's other people who feel that way, too. So we really encourage for those who are listening to practice the skill and hone the skill, to get better at it, because it can not only help you with boosting your own self confidence, it can help you in your career. And then, as Nisar also alluded to, it can also help you in other parts of your life, because this confidence, it will show up in other places, not just in your career or in the data spaces. So that's great to hear. Are there any particular resources, courses, or books that you have found that are particularly helpful, in your journey in becoming a better data visualizer as well as a presenter?
Yeah. So when it comes to data visualization, when I started off in Tableau, I was looking up, what are some good books to help me learn. And there's one very popular one, and I'm sure you know of it, and a lot of people do, is the Big Book of Dashboards, right? So that was the book. I bought that book, um, and it was on my table side the whole time. And what I would do is, anytime I had to create a new dashboard, I would look up that book, and I would try to get ideas. And there's tons of great visuals in there. Um, I would say it's more from, more the business type of dashboards, right?
Right.
And so I would look at it, and I would see, oh, this looks great and it's effective. How can I apply some of these to my dashboards? And so that's been a great help. I still have it here, at my desk, and sometimes I still look at it. But I think there are, and with Tableau particularly, Tableau has a great community online, a lot of forums. Even if you go to Tableau Public, you could search for any type of topic or dashboard, and you'll get tons of visuals out there that you can take inspiration from. And so that's what I try to do when it comes to learning, or research. Tableau, LinkedIn as well is a great resource. I probably learn on LinkedIn more than any other, uh, you know tool or medium. Is There's so many people I'm connected with who post about, um, you know new ways to do things in Tableau, and so that's what I try to take advantage of. From a communication or presentation standpoint, I wouldn't say I necessarily did any formal training per se. It was more learning by experience and learning by watching other people. As I mentioned, I would record myself, and I think that's something that really helps, is recording and listening to yourself and being comfortable with your own voice. I know a lot of people don't like listening to their own voice, the sound of their own voice. I didn't like it before. Now I gotten used to it, and I've worked on it to the point where I don't feel uncomfortable listening to myself. And I think that's some of the things that have helped me. Um, Early on, like when I was talking about being an introvert in school and never speaking in public, I had this one English teacher who knew that I was very shy and did not like presenting.
Mm.
But she also knew that when I talked, not I wasn't effective, but I knew what I was talking about, or she wanted to hear me talk more. And we used to have this, every year, this competition, each grade or each class in each grade would have one representative go up in front of the whole school and talk about any topic. And she wanted me to do it. She chose me. And I was like, why are you choosing me? Like, I don't talk. And she instilled confidence at me at that point. She goes, no, you're good at talking. You know, you if you get up and you talk, you will know what you're doing, and I want you to do this. And she pushed me to do that. And that was really the very first time I did any type of public speaking in front of any type of crowd.
Wow.
I was very nervous, but it was my first step in that direction. And I think um, getting that opportunity, or maybe having people who are mentors or people to push you or give you support, really helps.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing that she saw that in you and encouraged you, and she still that clearly had an impact on you because you're here talking about this. Um yeah, it's nerve-wracking, but it's when we look back at it, we don't think of that moment as something we regret, but something, even though we were scared and we were nervous about, we're glad we did it. So that's great. We actually had a question come in from the chat, from Ahmad. Any advice on people who are otherwise extroverts but still somehow share similar imposter syndrome and anxiety when with giving presentations on new topics or in high stakes contexts?
That's interesting because we're coming from this as introverts, right?
Right.
And we're thinking that perhaps we're thinking that we have anxiety and imposter syndrome because we're introverts.
Mhm,
But what I'm
right.
hearing here is that even extroverts feel the same way. And so I feel that the imposter syndrome, or perhaps that anxiety, um, extroverts perhaps talk as a way to deal with their anxiety, right? Maybe
Right.
that's their comfort zone. Whereas with introverts, we tend to be more quiet. So that's not to say that that we all don't feel the same way when it comes to public speaking. Um, I don't know if I have an answer to that because I I am not an extrovert, but I think there are things that you can do um, to help prepare yourself when you're giving presentations. Uh, Always be, as long as you know your topic and it's something that you enjoy talking about, I think a lot of those fears will go away. Sometimes, but sometimes over preparing is not a good thing as well.
Mm,
Okay? Leading up to this podcast, you sent me a list of potential questions, right? And I was going through them. I was like, okay, how would I answer these questions? Then I got to a point, I was like, you know what? I don't want this to be rehearsed.
right.
I want this to be natural, and I want it to sound like a conversation. And so that happens then is some of that stress gets taken away once you get that mentality.
Mhm.
And I think if we apply that mentality, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, to not worry about the small details and just be natural and have it be a conversation as if you and I are talking in person, in private, and there's nobody else listening, I think most people would be comfortable doing that. The difference here is now you have other people watching you and listening, but if you don't pay attention to that aspect, I think it'll make you more presentable, or give you the ability to present.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point that it seems like having imposter syndrome and anxiety is not inherent to if you are more introverted versus extroverted. And it's possible, as you say, that that extroverts may mask it well by speaking more loudly, which introverts usually don't do. We tend to be a little bit more introverted with that. But when it comes to like, yeah, I think a lot of the tips when it comes to giving presentations on new topics or high stakes contexts applies across the board for folks. For instance, I would recommend that if you're presenting on a new topic or unfamiliar or a complex one, just really know what your main message is to your target audience. Know that really well, because when you could if you tend to talk a lot or be comfortable with talking a lot, especially when you get nervous or anxiety, you may ramble on, you may lose track and go off topic. And if you just stay focused on your main message to your target audience, that will help you in executing an effective presentation, hopefully. And same when if it's like a high stakes context, is that you just really make sure, really hone in your main message, what you want your target audience to do after your presentation. And so this applies to introverts versus extroverts versus people who are charismatic or who tend to get nervous or not nervous in presentations. I think this advice applies to people across the board. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, I think we need to have an extrovert eventually on the show to tell us about how they experience things, because as an
For
introvert, I
sure.
also cannot relate to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, One final question before we end the show is, if you could give a Tableau training to anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
It's an interesting question. Um, right now, my audience is typically people who are learning or students. They're working professionals who are trying to get into the field, right?
Mm,
And they want to learn data. Data is all around us. I think everybody has access to data, and everyone uses data to some capacity, regardless of if you're in an analytics role or not. Um, what I would love to do is teach that to people very early on, or perhaps teach it to an
mm,
audience that have not entered into the career yet,
mm.
and teach them how to utilize or how to take data and how to present it. That's something that I think I would love to do, is maybe the younger audience. I also have a passion for sports. Like, I love sports. And I think if I were to ever give a training to anyone in like the realm of sports or talking sports, I wouldn't consider it work. I'd consider it something that's very enjoyable. So that would be another group of people I'd love to give training to.
That's awesome. That's great. I hope you get that opportunity to help and influence younger minds and help people with learning Tableau early on. I know when I was starting in the data field, Tableau was still a new tool, but I hear people are learning this even as early as high school, which is really cool
Mhm.
to hear this. Not just Tableau, but any kind of database software other than Excel, which is great. Um, awesome. Well, how can folks who want to connect with you or message you, how can they reach you?
Yeah. So you could connect with me on LinkedIn, just linkedin.com um, / business intelligence. Oh, you have it up right there. Yeah. I also have a YouTube channel with the same name, at Business Intelligence. So that's Biznis. It's a play on words, because my nickname growing up was Nis, short for Nisar. And so business is Biznis intelligence. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always checking my messages there, or on YouTube, my YouTube channel, which also has my training and podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. For folks who are listening on the podcast, I know that you're interested in hearing about other podcasts. So do check out Nisar's podcast, the Data Nerd podcast. He's wearing a cap with the name for the
Yep.
podcast as well. And then I think you're also wearing a data shirt as well. May the data be with you.
Yes. An interesting story about this, if you have a few minutes.
Yeah.
The very first presentation I gave, after I worked in Tableau, it wasn't actually teaching at General Assembly. When I did my very first dashboard, we were working. We had a Tableau rep for a company, right? And he asked me if I wanted to give a presentation. Tableau was doing a was going around different cities doing a roadshow, and they're like, "Do you want to present at the New York Tableau roadshow on
No.
your project?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great." That was actually one of the first times I did one public speaking on the topic of Tableau, and it was a great experience. I loved it, and that really helped me, when you're talking about presentations. But um, as a token or a gift for doing that, they gave me this shirt.
Love that. I love data swag. So,
Yeah.
I thought you had this in your store and people could buy it too, because that's a really cool shirt. Because we have to
No,
go to these
this
roadshows.
is sold by Tableau. I don't know if Tableau still sells this shirt, but they might.
Very cool. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today to share your insights, your tips and advice, and just hearing about your experience and your journey. I'm sure a lot of us could relate. I could relate to it. So it was really great to hear. And for those who are listening, be sure to follow Nisar. I'll include in the show notes the link to his LinkedIn profile, his YouTube channel, as well as a link to his podcast, the Data Nerd Podcast. Thank you so much, Nisar.
Thank you, Hannah.